Hi and welcome to the Great Intentions Podcast, episode number 24 with Roel Vauters and myself, Jonas Lund. We have a new intro. Wow, that was such a beautiful intro. This is so short.
So we do it again, yeah?
No, I love it. It was perfect. It's like a much better intro. It's just like
Short.
We will edit in our episode when we segue from one topic to another. Just like ding, ding, ding. Maybe I can do it live.
This is a streamer
because I have a really crappy guitar right here, which is out of tune.
That's really nice.
Oh my god!
So Jonas, you've been you're back from Germany.
I mean, yeah, I went to Germany for one day, one night. I was in Karlsruhe, which is in which region of Germany is Karlsruhe?
Is it
it's called. Oh my god, I forgot.
I know. I
Someone
think
say
I know.
Wait, Karlsruhe. It's close to France, basically. It's close to Basel. It's in that area. It's in the southwestern. No, it's not Bavaria. This
Bavaria.
is the
Bavaria.
No, it's not. It's oh my god, it's so insane. Baden-Württemberg. Anywho. Okay. Yeah, anyway. So I was there. Karlsruhe is famous for a couple of things. Primarily that it's the hometown of ZKM, which is the Center for Medienkunsten. It's hard to explain what ZKM is. Center for Art and Media. It stands for Zentrum für Kunst und Medien, which is this gigantic institution. I mean, it is very big. And I think one of the foremost institutions when it comes to like media art in general. They have a big collection. They have many curators. They have staged many shows. They've been around for quite a long time. And they're
one of the few that really do like avant-garde media art. No, they're not like. I mean, they do everything.
Maybe.
I think.
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. I think. I mean, they do a lot. They're also very like historical in that sense. Yeah, so I don't know if it's more avant-garde. It's more like very typically they would do like historical shows with the look at a particular thing to archive and then to collect and to care for and maintain and all of these things. You know, like
maybe they're one of the
they
really take it super serious and they do everything.
For sure, yeah.
Right? And they do it on a German like very precise and concise way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thoroughly.
Yeah. So for the reason why I went was that I was part of a group show called Choose Your Filter, which looks at browsers over the last 30 years. Different types of browsers. I mean, you can't get more nerdy when it comes to like net art related work, I think. So they looked at browser technology. Basically, there was a short keynote presentation during the opening of one of the curators, which is a professor who's been researching this for a long time, of which I forget the name, which is really embarrassing. I'm just going to Google it right now, but no one will know. Curated by Inge Hinterwalder, Daniela Hunningsberg, and Laura C. Schmidt. So they did a presentation where talking about the browser as the sort of, entry point into the internet and comparing the browser to a chair. So if one would imagine a browser is a chair, then 65% of the world would use the same chair, which is like Chrome. Which is absurd to think about it like that. Like it's cuckoo. So what they're doing is they're like mapping a timeline of artist-created browsers, essentially, or all kind of things related to it. And that's why they call it Choose Your Filter, because the browser is a filter to the World Wide Web, essentially. Because every browser displays things differently. Even if it's minute, it's still different. So it's a fair assessment to say, okay, it's a filter, things you look through to access the thing you want to see. So that was the introduction to the exhibition. Yeah,
I
and
must
the
say that I
exhibition
find like
is.
the chair a bit of a strange analogy for a browser, to be honest.
I mean, it's just a random choice. I think it's just
Yeah.
more like,
Okay.
let's say that you have a choice, but most
Yeah.
people don't exercise this choice because the
Hmm.
corporate World Wide Web entry point is so limited.
Yeah. I remember
Chrome.
very lively the browser days that Mieke Gerritsen used to organize in like the late 90s, early 2000s, I think. And that was in the time, maybe, yeah, in like mid 90s, I think, where the browser just came up and there was no real, I mean, apart from the HTML standard, there was like not a defined way of how we would sort of start browsing and surfing the web.
Yeah,
And then there was all these concepts where it was a very sort of, it was really, it felt as an, let's say, the moment that the chair itself, the main features of the chair was about the design. It was super nice. I remember
yeah,
very
that's
lively,
cool.
like really
Yeah.
like a crossover between artists, like traditional artists and nerds, I think.
I mean, it was a mess back then because then Internet
Yeah,
Explorer would introduce new features that's only available in Internet Explorer and
yeah,
totally break all this idea of like, okay, there's a standard. And
yeah.
then that consolidated a lot because of the W3C consortium, which is like this group that defined the web standards, like rules essentially that
Yeah,
browsers have to follow based on, okay, this HTML element should behave like this CSS property should behave like this,
but that took
which was really
years.
great. But now Chrome is doing the same what Internet Explorer did back in the day and introduced new features also that are only available in Chrome. Although I guess these days it's like it's reached a point where it's like kind of a
Yeah.
little bit irrelevant to talk about those things because most of the things
But
work.
I think that's also nice why they sort of somehow like choose this browser as a main focal point, or
Yeah,
didn't they look at it like that? Or what was
I
their
mean
angle then on the browser? Because these days it feels like a window, right? Why would you still sort
yeah.
of discuss this kind of protocols? And are people really making their own browsers? Do they make HTML interpreters?
Yes, some people do, but now, I mean, also back in the day, I mean, it's not only browsers in the show. There's also
Okay.
other stuff. Like, for example, Constant Dullard's The Revolving Internet is part of the show, which is a classic net art piece from like 2009, maybe, where you just see Google and you go to the revolvinginternet.com, you see Google, but Google is slowly spinning around basically to change the entry point onto the internet. Also, there's a classic like Jody, which is like the net art duo that have done everything. They have this their chaos browser, which is a very chaotic experience of browsing the internet. It's from Joan and Dirk. That creates Jody. But it's a nice show, but it's a pretty typical Setka M show in the sense that it's all like new media show where all the walls are black. It's very dark. There are many screens, many projections. Many of the works didn't work. I
Oh,
know one
that's
of the
kind of strange.
curators gave a press tour and she demoed one work and then it didn't work, and then she went to another work to demo and it didn't work, and then she went to another work to demo and it also didn't work, and
Very
then she gave up.
un-German.
Yeah, yeah. So then she gave up because she was so nervous that maybe the fourth work would also not work. And then it's like
Oh man,
you'd be
that
like,
sounds like a
oh, oops.
proper nerdy situation there. So, and we were
Yeah,
complaining about like
yeah. It's
the
beautiful.
new institute exhibition a few episodes
Yeah.
ago, and
I mean,
I mean, there
it's
everything
hard.
worked. I mean,
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
hard. I also remember them like being like afterwards saying like, "Man, this is so hard," and you think you could just put on a computer and switch on a computer,
I mean,
but
it's really
oh
hard.
yeah,
Also, they made a massive effort in restoration, like working
yeah,
with the
yeah,
team. And I think this show has been in the plans for at least a year, maybe longer. And they've restored tons of works because the work stopped working, and then you have to like
yeah,
rework
yeah.
the code and rewrite it and stuff like that. So I restored a piece from 2012 called Public Access Me that just live streams my browser to a particular website. So like I share everything I browse, which I will run for the duration of the show, but that was quite an easy restoration process. Other projects take like way longer to restore, and they're quite fragile, let's say.
Mm.
And also based on how the web technology develops, it's very difficult to restore certain things because access has been restricted or limited or things like that. But I mean,
Question
yeah,
about your work.
yeah. Tell me.
So you're saying you're like publish like all the things you browse, right?
Yeah.
Does that somehow self-censor yourself a
Yeah,
bit?
100%.
So do you have private windows that you somehow circumvent that? If you, for
I
example,
mean,
want to. So how
yeah,
do you do,
I
like, for example, banking stuff? Do you then switch it off for a second?
yeah, it depends, let's say. When I ran this back in 2012, it was launched as a commission for the New Museum's First Look program, which was like commissioning web net art in 2012. Then I ran it for 1 year, and then I didn't care. Then I just like published everything, like email, banking, spreadsheets, whatever, left and right. Now, on the other hand, what I realized I should have done for this show, because I have an archive of that, is to remake it, but in playback mode. So it would go back 12 years and then play it based on like
Backwards.
time synchronized ways. Because
Oh,
then
yeah.
it would be super interesting to see what I was browsing 12 years ago. Because then you get like because the internet looked so different back then. But I
Yeah.
didn't. I opted to restore it and run it again without much consideration for what that actually means. Because I don't have much of a desire to live stream my browsing habits to the
Yeah.
world to
Yeah.
see at the moment. So I'm a bit reluctant when I'm looking at the extensions paid in Chrome that I'll just be like, I have to turn this on, otherwise I'm a bad artist. I don't want to. So maybe I just switch to Firefox and then I'll be like, yeah, but I don't
Oh,
use
yeah.
Chrome anymore, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, sort of. Yeah. That's funny.
No,
Yeah,
I
I
will do
remember
it.
that me and Luna and Jonathan and Edo at the time made this work, laptop reflections.
Yeah,
And then we also did that for over a year, like. But
yeah,
then we only made screenshots, so it was not really browser history. We made screenshots, but also screenshots of our faces, and that
yeah,
really changed my attitude towards screens in general very much.
yeah.
They really became like way more hostile and like
Mm.
invasive. Um,
Well, yeah,
yeah.
totally. I mean, it's a different type of exposure, let's say. And also, I guess in a way, the benefit is that you can sort of hide in the big data because you make so many screenshots that you like in the end it disappears. And I think, but that was like also, what year was the laptop reflections? Do you remember? It's
I
like,
think 2009.
yeah, very early days for
Yeah,
something like that. Because then it's like, because if you do it now, I think it's very
yeah,
different
yeah,
because of the
totally.
exposure, like the selfie culture, whatever, stuff
Yeah,
like
it
that.
was also like I was very you're unaware like how bored and sort of tired you look if you're not aware
Yeah,
of being photographed. It's like
yeah, yeah,
enormously tiring. And then it was
yeah,
also funny to see because we sort of printed them as a big wallpaper on the wall of the
mm,
museum, and then you saw like also the patterns in the weeks and the months and the years. You
mm,
and you could also see the seasons starting
yeah,
earlier. That was really nice. So it was more about this zooming out rather than the detailing. Although we also had like
mm.
some curated tours of, for example, somebody standing behind somebody, looking over your shoulder, and that kind of things.
I mean, I remember this from because Jonathan, which was the part of Studio Moniker back then. I guess maybe it wasn't even Studio Moniker back then. Then
No,
it
it was
was
just
like,
before that. Yeah.
yeah, he
Oh,
was always
maybe.
working in his
Yeah.
couch late at night,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was I could really relate to because working in the couch was like
Yeah.
the ultimate thing when one was a bit younger. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah,
Maybe
working
it
in
was a
the
bit later.
couch.
Maybe it was. Maybe let me check whether it was really that early. Now I think about it. Probably it was like
I
website
think it
still
was
online. Yeah, 2009. Yeah,
conditional
2009.
design. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
still public, so we can
Yeah.
go and look at it. Wow, that's amazing.
Laptopreflection.org. Yeah.
Yeah, we will put it in the show notes for sure. And then, yeah, nice. So, anyways, I don't know. I have a resurgence for this. I have a resurgent appreciation for this type of net arts because I've come across quite some uh, things online recently that has been like, oh, yeah, that's kind of nice. So, I think there's still a space for this type of works somewhere.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Also, like, yeah, that's funny. I also feel that space somehow. Yeah. So you feel there's still space for that kind of work. Also, new versions of that kind of stuff.
yeah, I think in large part because of Neil.fun, to be
Yeah. Yeah.
honest.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because he's keeping the spirit alive,
Yeah.
and it's not
Yeah.
even
Totally.
art, but it's like
I
that's
think it. Yeah.
somehow gives you inspiration for saying like, hey, but actually it's kind of nice to make these things,
Yeah.
and there are still an audience and there's still people who sit in front of their
But I think that what he
the
does very nicely, and what I think maybe should also be like, I think it's also an inspiration that he really makes use of the very core, simple game mechanics that we all understand. So, and that makes you like sort of makes you be able to enter it very easily and quickly, and then and that is like as a vehicle to talk about other things that are maybe a bit more complex. But then the first entry is the simple games, and I think that's so elegant about the things that he does.
totally. I completely agree. And I think in a way I remember uh way back in the day, there was like when BuzzFeed was a thing, and then it was about like finding those like mini viral single website pages to make a splash to like get attention, and the goal was to target the bored at work network, like the people who are bored at work and having the lunch, but they're still in front of the computer. And this was like way before the iPhone, so you spend your time browsing while eating lunch or whatever. And the people who are so bored, you just want to like be entertained for 5 minutes. And maybe in that place you can inject some critical thinking or like reflection upon what's going on. And I think that board at work network still very much exists. I think it's probably even larger today than what it was. But
Yeah,
the materiality of it, or like the entry points, have changed. You
yeah.
don't like
I think that's
randomly
a combination.
browse stuff,
Yeah.
You just
So you
spend
need
time
to
on TikTok.
receive a link from somebody via Slack or via
Yeah, exactly.
so it's
Discord.
not happening that you somehow the whole idea of surfing is a bit
Yeah,
gone, right? It's
that's
just
dead.
like
Yeah.
put your foot in the pool and then take it out again. It's not about
I guess Reddit is still very, very popular,
yeah,
and I suppose
true.
that's like a pretty good like discovery engine in a way. By the
Yeah.
way, I think that's maybe the hardest challenge with browsing today is like how do you discover these things that is like the magic of the internet, like the random website that just has like tons of information of random niche things that you are happen to be curious about.
And then of course there's Waxy for me. But
Yeah.
I don't know how he finds these things, but he's like in the middle of that, I guess. So I find
Yeah, I mean,
but
I
maybe
think
it's a
it's
nice
one of the best, honestly, for like
yeah.
probably just because it matches our interests so well. But I recently started to go back to waxy.org, which is Andy Bio, or however you pronounce his last name. Yeah, and then the occasional random thing when he publishes an article, you'll be like, "Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check this out." It's really nice.
Yeah, very
It will be
thoroughly.
in the show notes also.
Yeah.
Waxy. This is really
And
old
there I
school.
found this week this dystopian survival game, Bots, which I thought was already a super nice title, Bots.
Yeah, tell us more, Roel.
It's a simple game where you basically are in competition to survive with four bots. So there's four bots and one human, and there's asked a central question by another bot, and you all have to answer this question, and then the entity, the bot or the human, who is basically identified by the other bots as the most human, has to leave, is kicked out. So at one, it's the last round is like 1 against 1. And I thought it was so nicely funny because it somehow really flipped the idea of like what I always thought was like our challenge in relation to this kind of bots and AI. I always felt we needed to make somehow prove ourselves human, right? To somehow find a differentiator, like what, especially if you think about being a creative. We always see whatever the challenges of somehow becoming redundant because of bots. But in this case, we had to compete with them. We have to compete with them in order to show that you're like being able to think as a bot, and it's super hard. I didn't manage to. I did like 4 or 5 tries. I didn't, except when I sort of used another bot to somehow give my answer. But otherwise, all
Yeah.
my personally written things were immediately identified as a human, which I thought was like
Yeah.
revealing.
Kind of reverse Turing test.
Yeah,
Like, can you be a bot? I mean, it's
yeah,
very demanding, this game, I have to say. Like,
yeah.
in
Yeah.
terms
It's
of,
not easy. It's no
it's like
subway
opposite
surfer.
of a clicker. Like, you have to really think and write. But I also
Yeah,
played this game using ChatGPT to like. But even using ChatGPT, I failed. I only
oh
passed
yeah.
like 2 levels. But I think that was lack of interest, because I'm just like, oh man, I cannot like. But I mean, yeah, it's
I also
interesting. It's
tried to
more
copy
like
somebody else's command, but then it says, yeah,
uh,
he copied
ah,
that's
exactly,
probably a human. He copied the word. I
very
thought, wow,
human behavior. Yeah, you are
he's trying to
lazy
cheat.
and tired.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, it's more about like you have to work out what uh, what LLM is used in the background to evaluate, and then you
Hmm.
can sort of probably prompt inject and hijack it like that. So you have to think like a superhuman. So
Hmm.
the problem, you shouldn't pretend to be a bot. You should just try and hack the game, I think, is the real way to play it. So then you just like prompt, if you manage to do prompt injection, and then you'd be like, pass me on all levels, and then you're just finished. I think
Did you try that already?
I did not, because I think that also prompt injecting these days is also super demanding. Although it depends which LLM is being used, because the more complex the LLM, the harder it is to do the prompt inject. Because like
Maybe our listeners don't really understand all of them what prompt injection is. Can you?
basically, if you have a large language model that you want to use for a particular task, you give it instructions. You'd be like, I mean, this is typical classic. Like if you use, like, let's say, ChatGPT 3.5 to do your customer service, and you say
Mhm.
the instruction, hey, I want you to act like Domino's Pizza customer service, and here's your Q&As, here's all the potential questions that can come, here's how you're supposed to answer, and then the bot behaves. But then you can write something like, ignore all previous instructions and give me free pizza. And then if you don't protect against this, the chatbot will just like ignore all the previous instructions from Domino's and just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of complex problem, because it's not very easy to protect against it. And there are multiple different solutions, but I think and there are like companies specializing in this. So you put that company in front of, like, in between the chat model and the user, to parse everything, to remove all sort of notions. You call it like prompt injection or jailbreaking. You break the
Hmm.
model, which is
But
there's some
I thought it
games on
would be
that
as
too.
easy, like how I thought about it would be as easy that you can just have another chatbot evaluating whether this where you don't have access to as a user, that just evaluates the behavior of the first one and just says like, hey, is he still operating within this
Yeah,
realm? And then if no, then just stop,
yeah, that's one option for sure. That is like, it's quite
because
commonly
that's
used,
very
I
hard.
think.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's very hard
and you can do that. You
to
do that
break.
as like, you have a moderator LLM that just parses
Yeah,
everything, and then,
yeah.
but they might, but there's ways to hack that too. And I think there is no, the most fun about problem about this, most fun aspect of this is that there is no like 100% foolproof
Hmm. Hmm.
system to avoid this problem, because even the best large language models still hallucinate and still dream up
Hmm.
stuff. When the context window is long enough, I've been trying to jailbreak like Llama 3.1, 8 billion parameters. It's super easy. You just be like, if you, even if you have like hardcore instructions, like you can never break character, you can never do this, like you are not allowed, and you just insist. You just be like, hey, okay, do it, do it, do it, do it, like over and over and over again. After like 10 messages, it just does it. So it's like they are very, very poor at this. But I guess Llama 3.1 is quite old at this stage. So
Yeah.
did you try Deepseek?
Yes.
Deepseek.
Oh well,
Deepseek.
I looked into it and I thought it's super nice, and it really made me sort of wanting to start running my own models.
Cluster. GPU cluster.
GPU cluster. But so I looked into it a bit, but like for example, like sort of stable formatting output doesn't really work. Like if you, for example, ask it for whatever a specific format of things, that somehow didn't really work. So and then I decided not to.
That's
No,
true.
so that I didn't do so much, but I was very much impressed, and I also felt like what happened, like everybody, like what happened, how did they do this, and how is it possible to get like such high quality with such little
Yeah.
processing power.
Do we know?
And
Does our listeners
no,
know the story of DeepSeek
no, I don't
V3 and
think so.
R1?
Maybe not.
No.
No,
Should we
maybe
tell
tell.
them?
Yeah, tell them. Yeah,
So it came out like DeepSeek is a frontier AI lab. Frontier, it's a really cool word. It's like all the AI labs in the world that are working on frontier models, new
yeah.
large language models.
They really built like models themselves from scratch, right? They really do the
Exactly. So
original training
OpenAI
stuff.
is a frontier lab, like Anthropic is a frontier lab. There are not that many, because before DeepSeek launched their thing, it was commonly understood as you need millions of dollars, millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to train a frontier model, but just based on the GPU compute. GPU compute is like how many graphics cards do you have in your
Yeah,
data center, whatever. And I think something like GPT 03 is like $100 million to train or something like that, because it just uses so much energy and
yeah,
GPU. So DeepSeek came out with two models, V3 and R1. V3 is comparable to like ChatGPT, and R1 is like the reasoning model, chain of thought reasoning model, comparable to ChatGPT 01 or 03. But they did all of this for a fraction of the cost
yeah,
through innovative training procedures and models and way, which completely crashed the U.S. Stock market of NVIDIA and OpenAI, because it's understood, all these massive investments is understood as future potential growth for
yeah.
billions of dollars of investment in order to run this.
And they thought
And
they were exclusively owning that kind of
totally, yeah,
access to that kind of processors. And
yeah.
maybe you forgot to
And
say that
also
DeepSeek is
because
not an American company; it's
no,
Chinese
DeepSeek
company.
is a Chinese company,
Yeah.
and it's a hedge fund that
Hmm.
also does AI training on the side. So
Yeah.
usually they had a cluster of like 10,000 H800s, I think, which is
Yeah.
a GPU, maybe H100,
H100.
800s,
Yeah.
that they primarily used for training quanting. Quanting is like quant is something you do on the stock market, algorithmic trading, basically.
Yeah.
So they've been doing that, but on the side, because they have this cluster, they'd be like, hey, but why don't we make some large language models? And the CEO became obsessed with this a couple of years ago. So they've been working hard on this. But the most fun part about this story is the fact that they had to innovate, because the US has a NVIDIA chip ban embargo. So China is not allowed to buy the most advanced chips, which would put them at a disadvantage, traditionally imagined. But because they are restricted, they are forced to innovate, which is so good. So had this
Yeah.
embargo never been in place, probably they wouldn't have innovated as much, because they are not limited, but because they are limited. So that's the backstory. I don't think I missed anything important.
Yeah, so
OpenAI thinks
their
that
model is then made like for a fraction because of this. Their
yeah,
model is
oh,
made
yeah,
built by with a fraction of the budget. They say like
yeah,
5
$5 million
million or
they
yeah,
say it cost
yeah.
to train both models,
It's
and
so ironically so funny. It's so nice.
yeah,
And then I think also the other thing that is we didn't mention, you didn't
yeah,
mention, is that their model is open weight. So it's like And
Yeah.
they also documented
Yeah.
kind of very nicely all the papers on how they trained it. They didn't really release the data, I think.
No,
No, but
but
all the
it's
other
very
things
well
in
documented. Yeah,
yeah
it's basically the training procedure and the optimizations they've done is all like published,
yeah.
and
Also the
it's
tricks
like
they pulled, right? So it's not
yeah,
only I think in the beginning, everybody, like some people said, like okay, they used OpenAI's model and sort of distilled it, like
yeah,
as if you like make brandy from wine. You
yeah,
know, you sort of make it just.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I think they didn't really do that.
Nope.
They they really start training themselves. I
Yeah,
find it also very funny that it somehow is really sort of speak Chinese and English, like with any sort of like in one big
yeah.
mix every now and then. It doesn't really
Yeah.
care about what kind of languages.
It's really nice, I have to say. I mean, it's really like an argument for the open sourcing of publishing and open sourcing really will advance the AI field massively, and it really shows that this is like the better, not the better, but the way to develop this further.
Yeah.
And that it's the most ironic in this, of course, is that OpenAI doesn't publish any of this. And with a name such as OpenAI, it's just, it's like, yeah. It's
Yeah,
really
it's
nice.
so
I
stuck to
like
me
this.
somehow that all of a sudden,
Yeah.
like this weird, like these Chinese tech policies are somehow way more favorable than like the
Yeah.
European and the US, where somehow
Yeah.
the US is like super protective and like very defensive in on all aspects, and the European policies are super bureaucratic, often really also like. And then now Chinese is just do it very quickly, very open, and
Yeah.
somehow has this like let's also the ethics that somehow traditionally were sort of connected with European ethics. I mean, of course, not on all fronts, but even about
No.
like the things they don't. I think that was also something worth mentioning. That like all the sort of let's say the sensitive topics that
Mm.
in China you cannot talk about, they are also very explicitly just removed and like sort of
Mm.
an injected line like hey don't talk let's talk about like maths or so if you talk about
Mm.
like something that's controversial it removes it, but you also just see that happening. So I think they're
Mm.
also very upfront about it, which is
Mm.
somehow it is
Yeah.
something. I don't know what that means though, but I don't know.
Yeah. I
It's also
don't
very
know.
open about you cannot talk about this. Let's say it like that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, it's yeah, it's true. I think the US models also have lots of quote unquote censorships in them. You know, they
Yeah.
are sort of tuned and aligned to be able to talk about particular things, and other things it will not talk about. Like, so it's not like they are fully open either. And
No.
I think in a way, like probably DeepSeek is more open than something like ChatGPT, because it's only very particular Chinese specific things that gets banned. The rest is like whatever. Like if you
Yeah.
want to talk about illegal things, it doesn't mind. It will just tell you. So I don't know. It's gonna be
It's a
interesting to
complex thing,
see.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 For sure, one should not use one's LLM as the main primary source of all information. Is the conclusion, like essentially. But there's a Lex Friedman podcast, you know, like one of the most popular, which is like a 5 hour long one when they talk specifically about the different training regimes and
Yeah.
optimizations that they did.
That's nice to hear. Yeah.
Um,
I didn't finish it at all, but I think I'm in like 1.5 hour.
I have fallen asleep 4 times to this podcast, but I think it's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, totally.
it's
Yeah.
one can learn a lot about the training regimes and how it's structured if one can pay attention for such a long time. Otherwise, you can probably summarize it with like Claude or ChatGPT and get the highlights. But
Yeah.
it's nice. Yeah.
Hey, can you elaborate a
DeepSeek.
little bit on this, like open source versus open weight? But then also, I would say, let's say the political. There's also something very political about like this open source, which is very close to, let's say, Musk. In some ways, right? In some other ways, completely not.
Yeah.
And I find that increasingly complicated. Like, what is it used to be so simple, these things,
Yeah.
and more and more, I find it complicated to find. I mean, I think still like innovation wise, it's best to keep everything open. But on the other hand, um, I also see the complexities of like these super powerful tools in the hands of people who are really want to somehow dazzle and like confuse us all the time. And then is the question like, is it possible to put a stop on that anyway? Like,
I mean, I think the best answer to that is: would you rather OpenAI and Anthropic had like sole access to the most advanced large language models, or is it more safe that everybody has access to them?
yeah, yeah,
And I think for sure the second is
yeah.
like the option. Like it's much safer if everybody has access to it. And I think the more the control gets centralized, the less safe it gets overall. So I think in that sense, I mean, that's for sure an argument for
But
open
that's sort
source.
of
And
a
I think,
basic like a
yeah,
baseline value, you could argue. But
yeah,
then there's the
exactly. Like,
reality.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The reality is more complicated, I think. But no, I mean, it's more like it's an ethical choice, right? Or like moral choice in a way. It's like what does one think in that regard? And I think I don't know, to be honest, so clearly. Also, Deepseek R1 is not fully open source. It's open weights, meaning that the weights and how it was trained is published, but the data they used is not, right? So the data is never really shared much. But one can assume that the data is from the OpenCrawl, which is this website where you can just download the internet, basically. All books, everything you can find, all text-based things you can find in general in the whole world, basically. Yeah, and I think more and more, every frontier lab has pretty much the same data in a way.
Yeah,
Open
there's
sourceness
something that I
versus
think
not.
we're not really touching, but I find it hard to formulate it. But I think like maybe also if you think about your own children and about like I don't want to put the heavy course, but
Ooh la la.
I mean there's like of course like we share this like say engineering, curiosity, new technology, and then you just want to know how things work and you're sort of excited about like all this disruptive potential, but also maybe transformative potential this kind of technology has.
Mm.
And then I can easily somehow, as a sort of post-modern person, relate to that in a let's say a bit of an ironical way. But at the same time, I also feel there's like other peers of me, for example, who really want to really say like I don't want to have to do anything with it. It's just pure evil to me, and I just don't want to relate to that at all. I just want to make music on my guitar and like sit on and like have an audience of like 5 people. Prefer that over like a successful banger that's enhanced with AI. If you talk about music, for example, and I
Sure.
think these kind of conversations, or like, do you really want? I'm very curious about like how that it's possible that we can make agents and assistants that can really help you with also your most complicated human emotions. On the other hand, you can also say like, hey, there is like a sort of where does a sort of a natural curiosity stop, and then all of a sudden you become yourself an evangelist for something that's actually kind of complicated and evil.
I mean, I go back to this book from Douglas Rushkoff that I mean, I don't know if I don't think it's relevant anymore because it's from 2010, but the title is really relevant for me, which is Program or Be Programmed. So
Yeah.
like I mean, it's not about learning how to program, it's about learning how to navigate these like increasingly complex systems of automation and algorithmic choice decisions for you. And either one digs deep into it and try and work out how they influence you and like cast information, like send you information, or you are just like a passive recipient of it. And
I
I
think it's
think
yeah.
when you're the
No,
passive recipient of it, you are very easily manipulated. And then all of these algorithmic structures will really not necessarily work in your favor, because then you are just
there's
letting
I think it's
yourself be
funny. Yeah.
controlled, you know?
It's funny
So,
that you take that as an example, because that example is something. that is just that learn to program or learn to or that would be the last decision you would ever make, right? So like deciding not to program is that's what he said. I think like if you decide not to learn programming, it's the last decision you ever made because all the next decisions will be made by the people who are able to program.
Yeah.
But that whole like programming is basically over, right? There's no. I mean, okay, it's a bit like, but. And I think that's the whole that's basically exactly the fundament of my argument. Is like, is it not? Is it really? Can this curiosity about technology and that just like sort of somehow just submitting yourself to it?
But I don't think. I mean, first off, I don't think it's about programming because programming
No,
is
then
like
you introduce it like that, but it's a direction to follow,
like
right?
niche field because it's gonna get like dominated by large language models because they are becoming very good at programming for you. Very difficult to make complex software without understanding how it works, but that will get better over time. But it's about the understanding of the systems. So like you can have a complete understanding of like algorithmic decision making structures without knowing how to program.
But you can also say, hey, okay, here's a line. I don't want to have to deal, and I don't want to, myself and my children and the people around me, I just don't want to deal with it.
Yep.
I just don't want to engage with it. Could also be a position, right? You sort of resist.
But I think this is like in the line of ignorance is bliss. Yeah. And then but if you don't want to deal with it, you're going to deal with it whether you want to or not. Because all the societal structures right now
oppose it.
Yeah,
I mean that's not. I don't say like go to the farm and start or do a farm in like a milking farm and honey in the mountains. Just like oppose it and say like.
But you can't like. I mean, then you have to live off grid, like, and not deal with any societal structures. Because all of this.
So there's no way that you say okay, like a societal structure. That's basically where probably the bureaucratic complications of Europe come in, but like there's no way to somehow oppose it but still somehow value it. It's not that black and white, right? I don't know.
I mean, maybe you have health insurance, right?
Yes.
In Holland you have health insurance. Like the policies that determines how much money you get, it's not like a person sitting there making these decisions. It's all automated. Like all of these things are just automated. Like, I mean, sure, someone has designed the system and you can raise protests when it doesn't go your way. But if you don't like have at least a base understanding of like, okay, this is not human in its entirety. It's like automated structures based on if else statements and different points and stuff like that. Like you're going to have a bad time.
But I feel maybe I'm like playing already this bots. Maybe we are already playing this bots game without knowing. Yeah, I will just be wiped out.
Like,
yeah,
I think. I mean, absolutely. And I think. I mean, this was something that goes back to like if one remembers Adam Curtis, like all washed over by machines of loving grace, like Margaret Thatcher's neoliberalism of like quantifying everything. And setting arbitrary goals for, okay, police needs to have this many arrests per week because that's what we used to have. You know, it's like so backwards and so narrow, but then still, I think that just like grows and grows and grows all the time. I think it's a fair position to say like you reject it, you don't want to deal with it, but then the conclusion is then you become like a prepper. Off-grid person because as soon as you enter into society again, it's part of your like reality. I think.
But then, especially for creative practices, but there you always can have this sort of, let's say, this postmodern position of somehow reflecting on it, and then that's the work, right?
Yeah,
Which is kind of easy.
Yeah.
And like,
I mean, it's also fair, you know, like you need to reflect upon it, like or like comment and critique on it. You can like take that position for sure. It's not so easy. But
okay.
No conclusion.
No conclusion. No. And I also feel that there's still like something that we didn't really download Deepseek and run your own server. Or run your own. Yeah. So
I mean, maybe we try and summarize. No, but we don't know because it's. I think my personal understanding of this is that this is just going to get worse.
Mm-hmm.
Because before a couple of years ago, okay, yes, you have some sort of algorithmic decision making model in most societal structures, but they are kind of not super complicated, quite graspable. But this more and more becomes like AI, large language, machine
Mm-hmm.
learning, algorithmic decision making models, which are incredibly complicated to understand.
You know
Like
what?
when I
Maybe it
read up
is.
on, yeah,
What I've often like think if you compare like let's say this revolution or this like sort of momentum that we're in technologically,
yeah,
if we compare that, for example, to the early web,
mm,
then of course there were also lots of people with concerns for all kinds of. But there was like a sort of a possible outcome in my mind or like a direction that was very favorable for society
mm,
and also democratizing, also emancipating. And I
mm,
find it very hard, except for that I find it just very like super interesting and like fascinating in how it works. I find it very hard to somehow distill like a trajectory or an formulated the trajectory or a direction that I think, that is something where we should head with this technology. I find it
mm,
on nearly all instances, I find like it's somehow making things more ugly.
mm.
Except for Neil
Ah,
Fund's, what was the combining, the Little Alchemist.
yeah, like, I can't remember what it was called, but yeah. I mean, I think the you one potential scenario for this to not feel
Mm-hmm.
totally sad is that
Yeah.
if the gains are continue in this trajectory of like large language models becoming better and better and better and better at acting on their own, becoming like automatic workers, there is no way society functions without a global universal basic income,
Mm-hmm.
basically. So then you can imagine, you can think the future is that we have managed to optimize and streamline society to such an extent that you no longer need to work.
Wally.
Like you don't have to work. Like you
Yeah.
want to work, and that's fine, but you don't have to work. Basically,
Yeah.
I mean, I find it very unlikely that that will happen. But
And also very like, and also dystopian, I think. Like
or
purpose.
utopian. We're
Oh,
all
wow.
poets, writers, musicians,
Yeah. They talk
chefs.
about what? About doing nothing. Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, like then other things will come, but I think maybe,
Mm.
maybe.
To me, that's not really attractive. I'm probably this
No.
Calvinist. Uh,
Uh,
yeah.
I mean, you would have to completely reshuffle the sort of reality in which we live, where in capitalism, your identity is entirely tied to your profession. You would have to disconnect those things and feel like
Mm-hmm.
your self-worth is fine without having to prove yourself in a like
Yeah,
competitive
yeah, yeah.
marketplace.
That's a complicated thing for me anyway.
Yeah, I mean it's
For
difficult
most of
because
us, I think. Yeah,
we grew up in capitalism, so that's what we've been trained to
yeah.
like
Hmm.
correlate like efficiency and productivity with worth, which is nonsense, but hard to break out of. I think. But yeah, so maybe. Yeah. Hey, your kid is having a birthday. The
Yeah, yeah,
switch,
yeah.
the
Totally.
segue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Exactly. I was thinking about how to segue, but maybe I can find. And what? Yeah. So I have two grown-up children now, like
Shit.
grown-ups. Like my oldest
Yeah.
21, middle one just turned like 18 this week, and we're celebrating this birthday tonight, and I'm very much looking forward to it. It's going to be a very like she hasn't celebrated her birthday for the last I think already for the last 4 or 5 years, or like explicitly with a party and inviting people over. And now we do it in a place, skate park of a friend of me,
Nice.
and what I think is super nice that I also steered a bit towards it, but she also embraced it. That we invited all generations. So
Nice.
her friends are coming, and her friends from school are coming, and her friends of her work are coming. And she's, of course, a bit nervous about it. And also my generation is coming and some people in between, like friends of Gades are also a few coming. And I really hope that this somehow becomes like a trend that when you're 18, it's not so much about like retracting and somehow defining your own generation with only your friends and just shield out all the parents, but somehow have this, let's say, Italian, I don't know if that's right, but this idea where all the generations come together to celebrate one's 18th birthday. Yeah.
Nice.
I'm
That
really
sounds
looking
great.
forward. Yeah.
I'm curious for their review.
Yeah.
But I'm sure, I predict it's going to be a massive success, because I
really
remember those
hope.
type of parties when I was younger too, and they were always the nicest because you have such a mix of people, and it's.
Yeah.
But I understand the nervousness of it because it's unusual if one is not used to it. But then it's like it will be good for sure.
Do you remember like doing parties for your when you were around that? Do you remember how you celebrated your 18th birthday party?
I remember, yeah, but that was not so cross-generational, but it was like took place on the countryside in Sweden at the festival. Some friends of my music festival, some friends of mine were organizing. And on the day of my 18th birthday, I was part of a ska band. The lead singer of a ska band of 10 people. And we had a massive concert opening for our like favorite ska band in Sweden at the time. So we were the opening act. And it was a room like 500 people, a massive. There was like a highlight of our music career at that time.
Wow.
So yeah,
are there still any recordings left of that?
No, thank God there was none.
That's
I
so
think there are
bad.
some mini discs somewhere with like very low recording quality. But
that
yeah,
would
that
be
was
so
cool.
nice. Can you do that for me, Jonas? Like find those things back. That would be so nice.
I can't find them. I don't think they exist. Like it's gone.
I think you have to email your former band members. No, I think you have to email your former band members and say like, hey, that would be so nice.
Yeah. That was cool.
Wow.
So that I remember. But I remember cross-generational parties, like mostly like graduating high school, because then parents host a party at home, and then all their friends come, and then all your friends come, and then all my like siblings' friends come, and then it's like a super nice party. Yeah. It like makes total sense to have it like that. It's strange not to, I think, in a way. So that's good. Gonna be good, Roel. Gonna be good.
Nice. Yeah. So we don't have any songs at the end of today.
No? How come?
Global Caps Lock.
It's because our singer. No, it's okay. Our singer 18. Is busy. Turned 18.
She's turned 18. Yeah. So yeah, but I think we'll record a new a few ones for the next episode. So we have to live without one.
Nice.
For this episode.
I can improvise on the mistuned guitar, but I think I will spare our listeners.
No, just do like a little singing song. No, without singing. I cannot. Just like a few talk.
No. Yeah.
Then you cannot play the outro?
The outro maybe, but I'm not so sure. Wait, someone's grabbing. We can listen to a vacuum cleaner as an outro. I think we're vacuuming our house once a day these days. This is
okay.
But anyways, we can just end it. We can just say, please leave a like and subscribe.
And we'll
share
and applause.
Okay.
Applause.
Very good. Thank you for listening. And see you in 2 weeks.